For most people, Christmas doesn't begin in December. It begins earlier than that, quietly, unconsciously, in the way days start to shorten, in the way shops rearrange their windows, in the way people begin to talk about the holidays, as if everyone automatically knows where they belong when they arrive. In Britain, in America, across Europe, Christmas is less a date on a calendar and more a shared assumption. And understanding that, no matter how chaotic the year has been, there will be a place you return to. A table, a familiar door, a seat that waits for you, for most of my life. I believe that assumption applied to me too, until slowly, year by year, I realized it didn't. It didn't happen all at once. There was no argument, no falling out dramatic enough to point it later, no single moment where someone said, "You're not welcome anymore." Instead, it happened the way many painful things happen in families, quietly, politely, incrementally. The first Christmas I remember clearly was when I was still a child, when everything felt large and warm and unbreakable. I remember the smell of food cooking for hours, the windows fogged with steam, the sound of wrapping paper tearing too early in the morning. I remember sitting on the floor while adults talked above me, convinced that this closeness was permanent. Back then, Christmas felt like proof that I belonged. As I grew older, the shape of it changed, but the promise stayed the same. Even when I moved out, even when work pulled me into different cities, even when life became more complicated, I was still part of the picture, or so I thought. I was the youngest in the family, the one people described as independent, with a certain pride in their voice. I moved out early. I learned to manage on my own. I didn't ask for help easily, and I didn't complain when things were hard. In the UK especially, independence is admired, but quietly expected. In America, it's praised out loud. Across Europe, it's treated as maturity. What no one tells you is that independence can slowly turn you invisible. The first year it happened, I didn't even register it as exclusion. December came. Work was busy. Life felt full enough. I assumed plans were still being discussed, still forming. Christmas has a way of sneaking up on people, after all. Then, a few days before the holiday, I realized no one had mentioned anything. No dates. No travel plans. No, what time will you get here? I told myself it was an oversight. Families are busy. People forget details. I waited. On Christmas Eve, while I was finishing work, a message came through. "Oh, we thought you were busy this year." That was it. No follow-up. No invitation attached. Just an explanation that quietly closed the door. I remember standing there with my phone in my hand, reading it again and again, trying to understand how something could feel both accidental and deliberate at the same time. I replied politely. I always replied politely.
"No worries.
Hope you all have a lovely time." That Christmas, I stayed home. I told myself it didn't matter. The second year, I was more aware. December arrived, and with it that familiar tightening in my chest. This time, I paid attention. I noticed conversations drifting around plans without ever landing on me. I noticed how often people spoke in assumptions. "We're doing the usual. Everyone will be there. You know how it is." I waited for the moment someone would clarify. It never came. A few days before Christmas, photos appeared online, decorations going up, a tree I recognized from childhood, smiling faces, still no message. This time, there wasn't even an excuse. I spent Christmas walking through the city, hands in my pockets, watching families hurry past me with bags of gifts and flushed faces. I told myself I preferred it this way, that I enjoyed the quiet. That lie followed me for years. By the third year, the pattern was undeniable. Christmas wasn't something I was excluded from directly. It was something that happened around me, without resistance, without pause, as if my presence had never been part of the equation to begin with. No one said I wasn't invited. They simply stopped thinking to invite me at all. That's the part people who've never experienced it don't understand. Being forgotten hurts more than being rejected. Rejection is loud. Forgetting is silent, and therefore harder to challenge. If someone tells you no, you can respond, you can argue, you can grieve openly, but when no one remembers to ask, what are you supposed to say? Please remember me. So I didn't, I adapted instead. I worked through the holidays. I volunteered for shifts no one else wanted. I told colleagues I liked low-key Christmases. I smiled when they said I was lucky, not to deal with family drama. Inside, something was slowly rearranging itself. I began to expect less, and expectation, once lowered enough, becomes resignation. Each December followed the same emotional rhythm. Hope would flicker briefly, quietly, and then extinguish itself before it had a chance to embarrass me. I'd walk past homes glowing with light, and feel like I was looking through glass at a life I used to be part of. I'd heat simple food, eat standing up, leave the television on for background noise. Silence at Christmas is different from silence on any other day. It carries comparison in it. Loneliness doesn't arrive as a crisis. It arrives as a habit. This year started no differently. December arrived. Shops filled with decorations. Streets glittered. People grew kinder and more distracted all at once. My phone stayed quiet. Then, a few days before Christmas, the family group chat suddenly came alive. Photos appeared, one after another. Children smiling. Adults laughing. A familiar living room, decorated exactly the same way it always had been. The caption read, "Can't believe Christmas is already here." I stared at the screen longer than I care to admit. I waited for the next message. I assumed one would come, a casual, "Oh, by the way," or "Are you traveling this year?" Nothing followed. That was the moment something inside me finally settled. Not anger, not sadness. Understanding. I realized then that I could spend the rest of my life waiting for people to notice my absence. Or I could stop building my life around a door that no one remembered to open. I closed the chat. And for the first time, instead of waiting, I chose something else. I opened a property website. I didn't know what I was looking for when I opened that property website. At first, it felt almost absurd, scrolling through listings, while Christmas lights blinked outside my window, while families everywhere were planning meals and travel, and who would sleep where. It wasn't a rational decision. It was a reaction. But reactions often tell us truths we've been ignoring. I clicked through apartments first, out of habit. Small flats near city centers. Places I could afford without thinking too hard. Places that made sense on paper. None of them stirred anything. They looked like the life I already had, functional, contained, predictable. A life that could comfortably absorb another quiet Christmas without anyone noticing. So I changed the filters. Not consciously at first, just instinctively. I dragged the map outward, away from cities, away from motorways, away from places where neighbors lived close enough to hear each other through walls. The screen shifted. Forests appeared. Hills, then mountains. Properties with long, winding driveways. Roofs heavy with snow. Houses that didn't try to look modern or efficient, but solid, patient. As if they'd been standing there long before anyone thought to forget me. I stared at one listing longer than the rest. The photos weren't polished. No staged furniture. No exaggerated lighting. Just a wooden house surrounded by trees, snow piled up against the porch. Mountains rising quietly behind it. It looked honest. The practical part of my mind tried to intervene. This is ridiculous. You don't need this. You're just reacting. But another voice, quieter, steadier, answered back. You've been reacting for years. This is the first time you're choosing. I didn't buy it that day. I bookmarked it. And for the first time in weeks, I slept deeply. Over the next few days, I found myself returning to the listing again and again. Not obsessively, not impulsively, thoughtfully. I looked at maps. I checked distances. I read about snowfall, access roads, local supplies. I imagined the silence. Not the empty kind I knew too well, filled with waiting and expectation. But a different silence. A chosen one. A silence that didn't require performance. Meanwhile, Christmas continued its approach. At work, Conversations buzzed with plans. Who was traveling where? Who dreaded which relative? Who couldn't wait for a break? People asked me the same question they always did. So, what are you doing for Christmas? I noticed how often I answered automatically. Nothing much. Keeping it quiet. Probably working. No one ever followed up. And for the first time, I realized something uncomfortable. I had trained people not to ask. I had made myself easy to ignore. That realization didn't come with shame. It came with resolve. 3 days before Christmas, I made the call. The estate agent sounded surprised, then impressed, then cautious. Yes, it's quite remote, she said, especially this time of year. I know, I replied. There may be heavy snow. I know, you'd be alone up there. I paused. Yes, I said. That's the point? By the time I hung up, my hands were shaking. Not with fear, but with something dangerously close to excitement. I packed lightly. Clothes. Food. Books I'd been meaning to read for years. Nothing decorative. Nothing festive. No attempt to recreate the Christmas I'd been missing. I wasn't going there to pretend. I was going there to breathe. I didn't tell my family. Not because I wanted to punish them. Not because I was trying to make a point. I didn't tell them because I was tired of explaining my existence. There was no dramatic goodbye. No suitcase dragged through an airport. Just a quiet departure, like slipping out of a room where no one had noticed I was still standing. The drive took most of the day. At first the roads were familiar, busy, gray, lined with shops and petrol stations and last-minute shoppers. Then, slowly, they narrowed. Traffic thinned. Buildings gave way to fields, then forests. Snow began to fall somewhere along the way. At first lightly, then steadily. The radio lost its signal. My phone flickered, bars disappearing one by one. Normally that would have made me anxious. This time, it felt like relief. With every mile, something loosened inside me. I thought about Christmases past, not just the recent lonely ones, but the older ones too. The ones where I'd already started to feel slightly out of place, even before I was forgotten completely. The way conversations drifted away from me. The way plans were made assuming I'd be fine. The way my independence had slowly turned into expectation. I wondered when, exactly, I'd stopped being someone who was included by default. There was no single answer, just 1,000 small moments of being overlooked. By the time I reached the mountain road, dusk had settled in. Snow covered everything now, trees, rocks, the narrow track ahead. I drove slowly, carefully, heart steady but alert. When the house finally came into view, it looked exactly like the photos, and completely different. Photos flatten things. They can't capture scale, or silence, or the way a place feels when you stand in front of it alone. The house stood back from the road, partially hidden by trees. Snow piled high against its walls. No lights on, no footprints leading up to the door. It didn't look abandoned. It looked undisturbed. I parked and sat there for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. A thought crossed my mind then, the last echo of an old fear. What if this is a mistake? But beneath that thought was something stronger. What if it isn't? Inside, the cold hit immediately. The kind that settles into your bones if you let it. I moved quickly, stacking wood, lighting the fire, watching the flames struggle at first, then take hold. The house began to warm slowly. I unpacked without rush. There was no one waiting on me. No schedule to keep. No expectation to meet. That night, I cooked properly. Not out of obligation, but out of care. I took my time. I listened to the sound of the fire. I noticed how quiet my mind felt when it wasn't anticipating interruption. Later, I stepped outside. The sky was impossibly clear. Stars scattered across it in numbers I hadn't seen since childhood. No distant hum of traffic. No voices. Just wind moving through trees, and the faint crunch of snow under my boots. I stood there for a long time, and in that silence, something unexpected surfaced. Grief, not sharp, not overwhelming, just present. Grief for the years I'd spent shrinking myself. Grief for the invitations I'd hoped for. Grief for the version of me who thought being forgotten meant being unworthy. I let it sit there with me. For once, I didn't rush past it. Christmas Eve arrived without ceremony. No last-minute shopping. No frantic messages. No countdown. Just daylight fading into night. Quietly, I cooked again. I ate slowly. I poured a drink and held it in both hands, warming them. I didn't check my phone. At midnight, I stepped outside again. The snow reflected the starlight, turning the world pale and endless. I breathed in deeply and felt something settle inside me. This wasn't loneliness. This was solitude, and the difference mattered. Christmas morning came gently. Light crept in through the window, soft and pale. I woke without an alarm, wrapped in quiet. For a moment, I didn't know what day it was, and then I realized it didn't matter. I made coffee and sat by the window. Watching the sun rise over the mountains, I felt present, whole. Then my phone vibrated. A signal, just barely, a message, from the family group chat. Where are you? We assumed you'd come like usual. Like usual. The words sat there, heavy with everything they didn't say. I didn't reply immediately. I looked out the window instead, at the mountains, the snow, the firelight reflecting faintly in the glass. I took a photo, and I typed a single sentence. I'm exactly where I was invited. I sent it. And for the first time in years, I didn't wait for a response. I didn't hear from them again that morning. No immediate replies. No clarifications. No apologies. Just silence, the familiar kind. Only this time it wasn't wrapped around me. It belonged to them. I turned the phone face down and let it stay that way. Outside, the day unfolded slowly. Sunlight climbed higher over the mountains, warming the snow just enough to make it sparkle. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called out sharp and clear, like it had something important to announce to the world. I went for a walk. The snow was deep in places, forcing me to move carefully, deliberately. Every step required attention. There was no room for drifting thoughts or half-awareness. The cold sharpened everything, the air in my lungs, the sound of my boots, the weight of my body moving through space. It struck me then how rarely I'd lived like this. So much of my life had been spent reacting, adjusting, anticipating the needs and expectations of others. Christmas had always amplified that instinct, the need to fit, to be easy, to not cause inconvenience. Up here, there was nothing to fit into. The land didn't care who I was or where I'd come from. It didn't expect me to perform or explain myself. It simply existed and allowed me to exist alongside it. By the time I returned to the house, my phone buzzed again. This time, there were messages. We didn't mean it like that. We just thought you'd say if you were coming. You know how hectic it gets. I read them slowly. They weren't cruel. They weren't malicious. They were worse. They were reasonable. That's what made them so effective for so many years. Reasonableness is an excellent shield against accountability. It allows people to believe they've done nothing wrong, that things simply happened the way they did. I typed a response, then deleted it. I started again, then stopped. What I wanted to say wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply true. And truth, I had learned, doesn't always land where you want it to. So I wrote carefully. For a long time, I waited to be asked. I stopped waiting. I sent it. There was no immediate reply. I didn't need one. The rest of that day unfolded in a way no Christmas ever had before. I cooked without rushing. I ate without glancing at the clock. I read by the fire until my eyes grew tired, then closed the book and let my thoughts wander without pulling them back into shape. That evening, as the light faded, I realized something quietly extraordinary. I wasn't missing anything. Not the noise, not the obligation, not the performance of togetherness that had never quite included me anyway. What I felt instead was a gentle, unfamiliar pride. I had chosen myself. That night, as snow fell steadily outside, I slept deeply, the kind of sleep that only comes when your nervous system finally believes it's safe. When I returned home after the holidays, life resumed its usual rhythms: work, Conversations. Casual questions about Christmas. How was it? People asked. I surprised myself by answering honestly. It was peaceful, I said. Exactly what I needed. I didn't elaborate. I didn't justify. I didn't soften the edges to make anyone else comfortable. Over the next few weeks, messages from my family trickled in, careful, tentative. Next year, we should plan better. We didn't realize you felt that way. Of course, you're always welcome. Always welcome. The words sounded strange now. Outdated, like a door that had been unlocked long after I'd stopped standing outside it. I replied kindly. Briefly. I didn't argue. But something fundamental had shifted. I no longer organized my life around the possibility of inclusion. I organized it around intention. Months passed. Spring arrived quietly, as it does in the mountains, slowly melting snow, revealing earth beneath. I visited the house again. And again after that. Each time it felt more like mine. Not just the building, but the space it represented. A life that wasn't waiting for permission. By the time the next December approached, I already knew what I would do. There was no suspense this time. No hope flickering uncertainly. No watching the calendar for signs of invitation. I returned to the mountain house early, before snow made the roads too treacherous. I prepared properly, stocked food, chopped wood, settled in. Christmas arrived without announcement. This time my phone buzzed early in December. Are you coming this year? We're organizing everything now. I looked at the message for a long time. I thought about how much energy I used to spend longing for those words. How much I'd believed they were the key to belonging. I replied simply, no, but thank you for asking. There was surprise in the responses. Confusion. A hint of hurt. You prefer to be alone? Are you sure? It won't be the same without you. I didn't correct them. It hadn't been the same with me either. That Christmas, I invited others instead. Not family by blood, but by choice. A colleague who couldn't afford to travel. A neighbor who'd lost her partner the year before. A friend who'd quietly admitted she hated the holidays, but felt obligated to pretend otherwise. They arrived cautiously, unsure what to expect. There were no traditions imposed. No forced cheer. No scripts, just warmth, food. Conversation that flowed naturally, or didn't, without pressure. We sat by the fire late into the night, sharing stories that had nothing to do with small talk or obligation. Laughter came easily, then fell away into comfortable silence. No one felt forgotten. In the morning, as sunlight filled the room, I watched them wake, relaxed, unguarded, and felt something settle firmly into place. This was what I'd been missing, not family. Belonging. The kind that doesn't require you to shrink, or wait, or make yourself easy to overlook. Later that day, I received another message. A photo from my family's Christmas table. An empty chair. This is yours if you want it. The message read. I didn't respond immediately. I held the phone, then set it down. Outside, snow fell softly. Inside, voices drifted from the kitchen. Someone laughing, someone asking for more coffee. I realized then what the real revenge was. Not absence, not silence, not proving a point. The real revenge was becoming so whole that exclusion no longer had power over me. I sent a final message. I've built something that fits me. I hope you have too. And that was that. Now, when Christmas approaches, I don't brace myself. I plan. I choose. And every year, as the lights come on and the world leans into old assumptions, I return to the mountain, not to escape, but to arrive. Because belonging, I've learned, isn't about being remembered by people who forgot you. It's about remembering yourself.